Good afternoon to our audience in the United States, and good evening to those who are joining from Turkey and around the region. My name is Damon Wilson. I'm the Executive Vice President at the Atlantic Council, and we are delighted to welcome you to this conversation with Turkey's Vice President, Fuat Oktay, on Turkey and the post-COVID-19 world order. Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for agreeing to us and to address our community today. We're also very pleased to be co-hosting the Vice President with the Turkish Heritage Organization, a close friend of the Council. Before we begin, I want to encourage the audience to engage with us on Twitter using the Atlantic Council, AC_Istanbul, and Turk Heritage handles, as well as submitting questions using the hashtag #StrongerWithAllies. Throughout the session, we will take questions from our audience. For those joining on the Zoom platform, please see the chat box for instructions on how to submit your questions. The Atlantic Council had the pleasure of hosting His Excellency in 2015 when he served as the president of the Turkish Disaster and Emergency Management Agency for discussion on the Syrian humanitarian crisis. We're delighted to welcome you back in your new capacity, Mr. Vice President. The Atlantic Council was founded on the simple idea that the United States is stronger with allies, and that the world is better off if we work together to solve global challenges. To this end, we've been engaged with Turkey since our founding. We've had a presence in the country for over a decade. And in recent years, our Atlantic Council and Turkey program has deepened our work focused on U.S.-Turkey relations, regional security issues, economics and business, and migration. Under the leadership of Defne Arslan, and thanks to the support and commitment of our partners, our work on Turkey is expanding. And so today's discussion will be co-moderated by Defne, our director of the AC and Turkey program, and Ali Çınar, president of the Turkish Heritage Organization. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected all of our lives. The world is facing a challenge unprecedented in our lifetimes. Many countries around the world are beginning this gradual process towards normalization, but significant risks remain. Throughout the crisis, there's been a lack of international coordination and unity. We believe a common threat deserves a common response. What remains to be seen is how this crisis will reshape the international system. And so today we want to address this central issue. Will we see a new era of a heightened great power competition as tensions increase and a move towards economic decoupling? Or will the crisis reinvigorate multilateralism and international institutions and empower them to better handle new and emerging global challenges? Will the crisis mark the end of globalization or simply change the shape? What's the future of organizations from the United Nations and WHO to NATO and the European Union? So I'm greatly looking forward to hearing Mr. Vice President Oktay's thoughts and Turkey's perspective on how the pandemic will change the world order and the implications to Turkey. How will Turkey's position in the world and international organizations be affected? Fuat Oktay has been Turkey's vice president for the past 2 years. And prior to that, he served as the undersecretary of the prime ministry and earlier headed Turkey's disaster and emergency management presidency. So with that, Mr. Vice President, thank you for joining us. Let me turn the floor over to you. We look forward to hearing your comments, and then Defne and Ali will lead us through a moderated conversation with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Damon. It's great to be with you. Good afternoon to participants from Europe. Good evening to participants from Asia. And good morning, indeed, to participants from America. Let me begin by thanking the Atlantic Council and the Turkish Heritage Organization for hosting today's virtual conversation. I'll provide a brief overview of the world before, during, and after COVID-19 prior to yielding the floor for your questions. I argue that, as you all will indeed predict, that certain things will change, of course, and certain pre-existing trends will accelerate, and certain things will remain the same. But before I start, let me express my condolences for the demise of one of your US citizens in Minneapolis who appeared to be a victim of violence. I hope that we as humanity All will take a lesson from what is done and lived through, and I wish no one will ever experience such a deplorable occasion. Prior to the coronavirus pandemic, the international community was dealing with four major challenges. First, there were serious questions about the liberal international order and the global role of the United States. The resulting power struggle between Washington and Beijing, not to mention Moscow, became more visible in recent years and made a global impact affecting individual countries. In this regard, chaos in the international arena and the declining performance of international organizations were some of the problems that predated the COVID-19 outbreak. In response, Turkey, under President Erdogan, called for a reform of international organizations, including the UN, to promote law and order throughout the entire world. That message, the motto was the world is bigger than five. Unfortunately, that message fell on deaf ears. That struggle for global leadership coincided with a humanitarian crisis. The civil war in Syria claimed countless victims, displaced millions, and forced over 6 million Syrians to seek refuge in other countries. As Turkey became home to the world's largest refugee community and a global leader in humanitarian aid, irregular migration reshaped the lack of retaliation signaled to criminals elsewhere that they could get away with murder. Indeed, we saw a spike in violence, including in Libya, where the warlord Haftar has been trying to topple the UN recognized legitimate government with the help of certain foreign governments, such as France and Egypt. At the same time, the nation state was believed to be on the verge of extinction, as you will all remember. Conventional wisdom dictated that the free movement of people, goods, and capital rendered national borders obsolete. We witnessed the rise of non-state actors from multinational corporations to even terrorist groups. Indeed, indeed, since the early 1990s, non-state actors came to play a prominent role in national and international politics. National producers of food, chemicals, automobiles, etc., became incorporated into global business empires as terrorists came to be treated as supposedly legitimate partners. Supporting YPG, the terrorist organization PKK's Syrian component, under a misguided policy of fighting terrorists with terrorists, is a good example of fighting terrorists with terrorist policy. Although Turkey effectively annulled that policy, that non-state actors were gaining strength was still a widely held view before the outbreak. Last but not least, the pandemic, the pre-pandemic global economy was built around a single supply chain with China at its core. China displaced the United States as the world's largest manufacturing nation back in 2010, ending Washington's 110-year run. By 2018, the United Nations Statistics Division reported that gap had reached to nearly 10%. Economic rivalry manifested itself in US politics as President Trump tried to create manufacturing jobs and waged what some call the trade war against China. The coronavirus outbreak challenged some of those assumptions and reversed or accelerated those trends. It became clear that nation states were uniquely able to provide vital services. During the pandemic, people turned to their national governments rather than international or supranational organizations. Likewise, national governments demonstrated their unparalleled ability to mobilize resources, facilitate cooperation between the public and private sectors, and assist people and communities in need. Obviously, some countries outperformed others. Wealthier and more powerful nations, such as the US and the United Kingdom, suffered very serious losses, whereas Turkey and a few others coped with the crisis more aptly. In truth, we were ready before the pandemic. Under President Erdogan's leadership, we invested billions of dollars since 2002 into our free and universal healthcare system, supported the manufacturing industry, and maximized our state capacity. Even just as of today, indeed, we have opened just another uh, big hospital in US, an emergency hospital in Istanbul, and we'll be opening another two on Sunday, even during the pandemic. Turkey's transition into the presidential system enabled the seamless implementation of our national strategy. Those political and economic reforms helped Turkey to pass this stress test with flying colors. Our track record speaks for itself. Our recovery rate is over 77%, with active cases below 33,000. All patients, including foreigners, received treatment for free. We repatriated tens of thousands of Turkish citizens and foreign nationals from 126 countries in cooperation with Turkish Airlines and our relevant agencies. On top of it all, we delivered supplies to 84 countries around the world, including the US, mostly medical supplies. Secondly, the international community answered President Erdogan's long-standing call for a comprehensive reform of international organizations. As a contributing member of the international community, Turkey believes that international organizations must serve all of humanity. Only through adequate representation and inclusion can they serve humanity's shared interests. Abolishing or defunding those bodies is not a constructive approach, as far as I can see. Instead, we must reform and improve existing institutions and, if necessary, form new organizations to address pressing problems. So we should not form new organizations for the sake of forming new organizations. It has to happen if we really need those. The United Nations Secretary General's inability to broker a global ceasefire during the pandemic alone supports this view. Finally, the outbreak demonstrated the limits of the single supply chain. When the pandemic originated in Wuhan, China, incapacitating the world's top manufacturer, countries with weak manufacturing sectors suffered sudden shortages that resulted in bidding wars for medical supplies. In addition to fueling instability, this negative supply shock revealed the importance of self-sufficiency and alternative supply chains. Although this process of decoupling will be slow and painful, the pandemic resulted in a sea change. Finally, I'd like to make 4 predictions about the post-coronavirus world order. First, the world economy will move from the single supply chain to a multi-supply chain to limit its exposure to supply shocks. This is not necessarily about China. A single supply chain would have been equally problematic if the US were to play the same role. To fix this structural problem, we must look beyond individual countries and promote a multi supply chain in principle. For countries like Turkey, with our robust manufacturing industry and young and educated population, this is an important economic opportunity for us. Secondly, globalization will give way to regionalization in somehow. Many states lack the power to safeguard their interests, and political and economic experiences tend to be similar within distinct regions. This transition began prior to the pandemic as globalization became less popular and US global power somehow started to decline. That trend is likely to accelerate. For Turkey, this development could entail significant political and economic benefits. As a country with strong ties to major regions, Europe, Asia, and MENA, Middle East and North Africa, we can play a constructive role and forge win-win relationships with our regional partners. Thirdly, Turkey's push for reform will enjoy broader support in the international arena. The pandemic highlighted the shortcomings of the World Health Organization, the United Nations Security Council, and others. We must take necessary steps without delay to ensure that those organizations serve all of humanity. Everyone has a vested interest in properly functioning institutions, a rules-based order, and multilateralism. As an advocate for reform, Turkey, under President Erdogan, is ready to cooperate with all parties to effect meaningful change. Finally, the pandemic busted certain myths. We have seen that the nation state is a lie. People turned to national governments during the crisis, and the shortcomings of international and supranational organization highlighted the need for nation states. Somehow, this is possibly the most significant perception change since the annexation of the Crimea, which busted the myth that the territory meant nothing in a globalized world. Having said that, a new definition of national power is desperately needed. Political scientists traditionally measured national power based on military, economic, and other types of power. COVID-19 revealed the limits of this realist approach, as supposedly powerful nations experienced bigger problems than those countries deemed less powerful. As such, the definition of national power must be extended to include the state of a given country's civilian infrastructure, healthcare, and social security systems, access to alternative supply chains, overall level of political stability, and the strength of its relevant sectors. This revised definition of power will accurately account for the exemplary performance of Turkey and others. I guess I'd better stop here for your questions. Thank you very much for your time. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Again, it's an honor to be hosting you here today as Atlantic Council Turkey Director, myself, and together with my colleague, President of Turkish Heritage Organization, Mr. Ali Çınar. And thank you for your remarks. It's very important to your views, Turkey's view at such a platform. Actually, I also need to say that you covered all of our questions. So, but we may detailize a bit moving forward if we can. And so I will, before moving on with my first question, I would like to just remind our valuable audience who joined today from all around the world that they can leave their questions in the chat box, and please follow the instructions how to do that, and we will address to them at the end of the event as much as we can. And thank you again for the questions. Mr. Vice President, you also touched base, in your remarks, but coronavirus is shaping up to be an enormous stress test also for globalization. You already said that the definition of globalization will be changing as critical supply chains break down, which you already mentioned, and nations hoard medical supplies and rush to limit travel. The crisis is forcing a major re-evaluation of the interconnected global economy. Do you think that COVID-19 killed globalization? Can you expand this part a bit? Even you mentioned in your opening remarks, how do you evaluate the world's response to COVID-19 from the international cooperation point of view? Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you for the question indeed. Let me start from the last and go through the beginning indeed. How did the world respond to COVID-19? When it did start in China, in Wuhan, most of the world thought that that will not really impact the rest of the world that much indeed. Certain countries have started preparing themselves and certain really did not do much. As Turkey, we were one of those countries indeed. We somehow predicted that it might have, most probably it will, impact the rest of the world because there was a virus, nothing much known about the virus. So we did started taking our own steps to prevent it to get it into Turkey indeed. Again, the reason that we have made huge investments into the healthcare system, not only as an infrastructure, but as system as a whole, and taking the necessary steps to especially that having the risk coming from Turkey's east and also west from the EU side. If you remember, Iran and Italy having one of the most affected countries within our region. So we did start preparing ourselves in earlier stage. But at the global perspective, at the global level, unfortunately, none of the even the supranational organizations started to prepare themselves. Like the EU, it was very clear during the management of the crisis, like when it happens in Italy. Remember the crisis in Italy and Spain. EU was not able to do much. And again, if you look at the criticism at the WHO, World Health Organization, not being able to kind of like bring all the nation states and all the international organizations behind it, somehow made the global world not getting ready for managing the crisis, unfortunately. UN, I guess not to mention even UN were not able to even, it took almost a month to get together for UN, for the Security Council, trying to take an action for preventing the conflicts, either in certain regions or throughout the world, and was not able to do that. So the global world and global corporations was not able to give a good, I guess, exam, if we can call it as an exam. We were not able to pass that exam indeed through the way that we have managed it. Again, I mentioned the way the individual countries reacted to the COVID-19 when it started spreading around, especially the superpowers, so-called superpower countries in in most of the places indeed. That includes China, that includes United States, that includes some of the EU countries, and even Russia in the region, were not able to reach to the medical supplies. So we were so focused as the entire world, so focused on the high-tech manufacturing goods, and we were so focused on the conflicts around the world and in the region, and we were so focused on the competition, and within a world full of uncertainty and no trust for each other, somehow made us, all of us almost, that we were not able to even keep up making our own simple masks just to protect ourselves from the viruses. So that showed that the globalization requires almost all the countries, including the organizations like the UN, EU, and other countries, NATO, and other countries, G7, G20, that requires an interconnectivity between them. If it were happened, we wouldn't have been really that shock of not being able to reaching to those medical supplies when needed, whether it's medication or other supplies indeed. So everybody tried to have those for themselves, for itself. Uh, that's why I raised the question, rather than globalism, all of a sudden, when a threat happens, we're seeing the countries leading for the globalization all of a sudden became a nation state, closed their borders, did not let others to get into their own countries, and nobody let their own citizens to go to others, right? Even within the EU borders. Think about the EU borders. And remember, the goods and services and people. The globalization requires the free flow of goods, food, goods, people, and services. And we, all of a sudden, during the pandemic, nothing was available. We restricted people from going through the borders. We restricted the goods almost going through the borders due to the viruses. And the services as well, limited them to the most. So unfortunately, there was not much globalization during the crisis indeed. We have seen mostly nation state examples. So after the pandemic, the way I see it is that nation states cannot really live through by themselves. No country can live through from now on.
Uh,
Somehow has hurt because that trust level. So most probably the regionalization start building upon, and through those regional organizations or regional countries, again, maybe globalization will go through nation states to regional states, regional countries, and then from there to the globalization.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for your valuable thoughts. You know, just so we need to speed up a bit. Ali, please move forward with your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thanks for your time and our partners, Atlantic Council. So our second question is, this health crisis has awakened in our minds the very real possibility of a health crisis. So what has this pandemic demonstrated about the World Health Organization's ability to respond to a global health crisis? Do you believe the organization requires a restructuring? How this should be restructured? Thank you.
Thank you. Not just for the World Health Organization, as far as I can see, almost most of the international organizations requires real reforms, real restructuring. They would need more kind of like decentralized, less bureaucratic, more flexible, maybe more transparent and accountable structures. They have to become somehow a learning organization. We need to have an organizational like change in the organizational culture. I was just looking at today. Indeed, I somehow predicted that we're gonna get into this WHO. Just that's an available information. I went through the internet as well and got some information to see what this really World Health Organization is all about. And I've told to people over there as well. Even today, I've told to them back in Europe and in Turkey as well. This is what I have seen. I just put it there so that I can show you. This is World Health Organization. To my picture, I'm not good at maybe providing organizational charts, but this is what we see here. There's a World Health Assembly formed of 194 countries, all member states. They have to get together once in a year in May to form the policies, decide about the strategies, to determine a pathway, to see what needs to be done for the entire world. Then there is another body called Executive Board, because you cannot do much with 194 even individuals. So those 194 member states, we are not talking about individuals. So those 194 countries are going to get together, make a policy, certain decisions, and then another 34 member states again will get together, form the executive board, and somehow they are also elected based on the equal geographical representative rule of the WHO. So they are supposed to turn those policies, translate those policies into a form so that the rest will understand. So think about how much time it might take for them to transform that policy so that the rest of the organization could understand. Then there is another body. This is the decision process at the highest level called Program Budget Administrative Committee, PBAC. So that's again 12 member states. They take what has been provided through the executive board and then translate them into programs and plans so that they can be implemented somehow, can be understood indeed. Then comes the regional offices, 6 regional offices. Every regional office has 53 member states. Now they need to go through the same process almost for their own region, through their own regional committees and standing committees. So these are still all high-level policies, strategies to determine the policies and strategies and the way to go to form a better healthcare system for the citizens of the world. Then it comes, this is the implementing body. So this is the organizational structure for the World Health Organization. It's available on the website of the WHO as well. So this is just the headquarters. If you go to the regional offices, most probably you'll find one of these as well. So forget about the individuals. I am not much interested at the individual level. If there is a problem at any place, that has to be somehow structural problem. We have to be able to determine what that problem is. So do you think such a structure will provide an efficient and effective way to deal with any emergency case like COVID or any other case? It will take months, if not years, to go through all these processes and make a decision. And if you go into more detail, you'll see that WHO is authorized. It doesn't have much operation authorization. The budget, 85% almost of its budget comes through the voluntary base. So then you have to go through all those programs and make sure that you'll be able to get those voluntary budget, fiscal budget basically, and then develop somehow get together with the member states and wherever the problem is. So you have to get it at the field level for anyone to manage it effectively. So I was heading that Turkish emergency organization as well. Indeed, we did the same over there as well. So there were many structures. So the first thing we did over there was that we said there's no way we can manage any crisis with this organization. So we have to turn it into, we have to change the culture first and provide a lean organization. Get rid of all the levels and bring all the capabilities of the country, all the institutions, rather than investing again, whatever is available at the country level, at the institutional level, ministerial level, one organization should be able to, in a flexible way, in a very fast moving decision-making process, we should be able to take the decision, get together, take the decision, and get at the level, field level. I am not talking about getting at the field level at an individual level, getting at the field level at the mindset of the headquarters level and physically getting into the headquarters level. So once we made that transition in Turkey, we were able to manage every single crisis, not even within Turkey, but throughout our region and throughout the world indeed. You might maybe recognize that wherever there's a crisis, Turkish agencies, we called AFAD, we are one of the organizations who go there first, even sometimes, most of the times, before the UN agencies. That is the main reason. So we have changed the organizational culture, we have changed the organizational structure into a lean, simple, and a learning organization part. And we have changed the working methods and procedures indeed. Our motto was simple, the better. The simpler, the better. So do you see a simplicity here? Do you see an inclusivity here? Indeed, when you look at the discussions within even the United States and China and others, indeed, what they are questioning is not whether WHO is being able to provide a better service or not. They are questioning whether this organization is benefiting their own country or not. So the international organizations should, that's why I consciously used that concept indeed, should be able to provide services, should serve all of the humanity. If we are able to make that transition, I strongly believe that then, including WHO, all the international organizations will be able to serve ourselves and our countries a lot better. In whatever we ask for ourselves, we have to be able to ask for others as well. When we learn that, I strongly believe that the organizations will change themselves accordingly. And it's not hard. I am just talking as a person who have gone through this process from bottom up. In Turkey, indeed, we have been within our new system, indeed, the presidential system. We are trying to, indeed, somehow change, make that transition throughout all our organizations. We might have 5 or 10 different ministerial organizations for any activity we get into, but none of those organizations recognized, as of today, I'm talking about, recognize that they need others to get their job done. They know that if they do their job as the best way they can, that organization makes sure, and they know that the rest will do their jobs as well. If they don't, of course, there are performance metrics as well that we follow closely. So yes, the WHO needs to be restructured as most of the other organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Just so also for you and for the audience, we are extending for another 15 minutes because this is so many things to talk about and to have a better managing the time. So, Mr. Vice President, very quickly, because we talk about WHO, and just recently also you also know that U.S. President Trump has threatened permanently cut U.S. funds to WHO, while critics have said that this move would cede the global stage to China. And these days, we are again seeing the China-U.S. relationship is again picking up. Do you see a potential power shift in the world, and how that may have an impact on Turkey?
Unfortunately, that struggle brought the world into this most uncertainty indeed. Just prior to the pandemic, COVID-19, just let's remember that all those trade wars and unilateral sanctions somehow turned, and regional and global conflicts, of course, turned the entire country into a place that was not even kind of like livable, if that's the right term to put into. I think one of the main idea over there was that power shift. And for those countries, especially between US and China, those trade wars and unilateral sanctions, yes, the two countries might compete with each other. That might be normal. But if that competition starts impacting the rest of the world, that's not fair to the rest of the world. Most of the countries have suffered, and most of the regions have suffered from this competition, including Turkey. We have suffered a lot. Turkey has become many times even at the United States, for many reasons became an issue in the United States. I was personally asked in many places whether that power shift will impact Turkey. I guess everybody has to recognize the new approach in Turkey indeed. So with President Erdogan, we do have a totally different approach. We don't see ourselves at one, no matter how many, either 1, 2, or 20 different power centers at the world. As Turkey, we don't see ourselves whether we should belong or we do belong or we have to belong one of those power centers, or whether we have to look at the issues from power centers power center A's perspective or from power center B's perspective. Turkey looks at the issues from its own perspective. So it doesn't matter whether it's China or US or others indeed. And including US and others should start treating Turkey, understanding Turkey, and somehow managing the relations with Turkey from their perspective as well. Turkey, as any country throughout the entire world, like the US, can you expect US to look at any issue, let's say in Middle East or in Europe or in Asia, to look at from Turkey's perspective to make a decision in the US? Of course, US management, leadership is gonna evaluate, analyze and evaluate and decide about all those issues from its own citizens' perspective. And that's exactly what we do. And we strongly believe that this is the simple result of being an independent state, indeed. A simple right, like the individual rights. This is the right of the countries, indeed. That's how we look at the issues. The only thing we would like to see is that whatever that power struggle, rather than shifting powers, I would like to look at it as a power struggle. It will take a new form. I've talked about supply chain issue, for example. The world cannot live in such an uncertain world anymore, indeed, especially after the pandemic. We have to somehow restructure the trust level. We have to somehow restructure or recreate a most trusting environment so that again we can restart the engines of the economy, engines of the services and goods, and somehow we should start the moving of those goods and services and people throughout the borders. So yes, there will be competition. Everybody can see that. We can see that between the United States and China. It's been going on as we speak, indeed. But as Turkey, we will take it, we will analyze it, and we will look at the issues and criticize the issues, make our decisions based upon uh, our own citizens and our own country's interests. Thank you.
Mr. Vice President, thank you so much. So we have lots of questions from audience. So we'll start to ask 2 questions of each. So I'll have 2 questions right now for you. The first question from Washington Post: has Turkey achieved its end goals in Libya? What would be satisfying status quo before Ankara? Would be a scenario of de facto partition between the countries east and west to be tolerable? The second question from AFP, the news agency: has Turkey already been approached by countries who are aiming to diversify their supply chains and move them out from China's to Turkey's post-COVID-19? So the first question is related to Libya, and the second question is related with supply chain, if there's a switch from China to Turkey post-COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you. In Libya, I've again mentioned in my opening speech as well, indeed, the satisfying result for Turkey is for Haftar and the rest where we're supporting that illegal power over there has to recognize that there is one legitimate and single power and government in Libya, which is the current recognized, UN recognized government indeed, led by President Sarraj. So Turkey is standing behind the legitimacy over there. Just as Turkey, we cannot, with Libya, we do have ties to Libya. We have lived together for almost more than, for almost like 500 years. People maybe from our audience might have questions in their mind that how come Turkey has got involved over there? We have been together for more than 500 years. We do have ties with each other, with Libyans and Turkish people, more than anyone else in the region. So if there is a problem out there, if someone comes in to the region and a dictator comes in, gets some support from some of the countries, I mentioned some of the names indeed, like United Arab Emirates and Egypt, and France even, and some other countries, and opening a war against the legitimate government. And after period of time, the legitimate government asking Turkey to help them makes us almost kind of like puts us into a sure that we don't have any other way but to help that government over. And we have with Libya and Turkey, we do have joint interests as well, not only living together for 500 years. We do have joint interest in the Mediterranean region, the Eastern Mediterranean. So we have seen that both of our interests are getting together and backing the legitimate government recognized by UN and make sure that that government cannot be threatened by any dictator or by any terrorist like Haftar. We will not that happen no matter what. We'll be there no matter what the outcome is. So we are decisive on that. And the President Erdogan has made it very open to the rest of the world. And we hope that EU, US, and others, including Russia, will understand that and hope that again, not we will not create another uncertain world, uncertain region in that part of the world, because any uncertainty within the region costs Turkey and Turkish people. Think about what has happened in Syria that has cost nearly 4 million refugees to us. We have more than 911 kilometers of border with that country. So we have, remember that we had almost like more than 100 countries around the world, tens of countries getting in there and trying to get into somehow certain type of interest wars. But Turkey as a neighbor, what we wanted since the beginning in Syria was a, a, a stable neighbor, a stable country, nothing else. We made it very clear. We made it clear to Russia and Iran as well, and to the US and the rest of the interested bodies around the world indeed. So the same thing is true for Libya. I hope not another uh, place in the Mediterranean region will be created for people and for especially for possibility for more refugees threatening the neighboring countries, including Turkey. So we will not let that happen. We will try our best. The second was regarding the question was regarding the supply chain. Yes, we see that the post-COVID period will somehow, nobody will say that, okay, let's start where we have left from. Most probably, there is and there will be a new normal. And that new normal will show itself in supply chain as well, supply chain restructure. Rather than having a single source, we will have, the world will go through multiple source. And Turkey, yes, does have a huge advantage to become one of those multiple sources, not of course a single source. I've mentioned it, I made it very clear. If that, no matter who that single source is gonna be, will be problematic. So we are not after becoming a single source for the supply chain. Our goal is to become one of those multiple supply chain sources for the world. Yes, we have started having requests from certain OEMs and certain countries indeed, and we have been preparing for it, and we have been after it indeed, not as the government only, but as our together with our businesses as well.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I will continue with the follow-up questions to all of this, what Adi just asked, before I ask my own question to you. This is from Matt Bryza, from our fellow Atlantic Council and former U.S. ambassador to Baku. Does COVID-19 provide new opportunities to restore strong Turkey-U.S. cooperation, perhaps by providing new priorities that outweigh pre-COVID disputes? This is the question, sir.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. But I would like to again answer that question from twofold indeed. The first, we didn't think that there was a problem within Turkish and US, between Turkish and US. And we didn't think that there was a big problem. Whatever the decisions that we have made, whatever the issues that you will remember, I don't want to name those issues indeed. Somehow, all of those single issues were turned into political issues through some lobbyists. And we have made it very clear to the US leadership. That includes Congress, not only the presidents. Made it very clear that this has nothing to do with the political side. Whatever the issues are, as Turkey, we have learned from our experiences that every single issue, we can deal with it at an issue based. But somehow, at the US side, no matter what the issue was, all of a sudden that was all of those single issues were put into a pot and got them mixed together, and they were used somehow as a potential arena to harm the US-Turkey relations. So that's why I said we didn't see that we did have much problem with US. So this COVID-19 period created another opportunity to understand each other. When US needed medical supplies, for example, Turkey was one of those countries who tried to help immediately. We even did not check to see whether we have enough for our own supplies or not. Yes, we did know that we do have, and we did have the ability to produce, to manufacture whatever we needed. But we were just there to help. And right now, with the Syrian issue and the Libyan issue and most of the regional issues even, not only with COVID-related issues, we have started communicating with each other a lot better. Indeed, at the presidential level, there is a very good communication process going on. There's a trust level going on. So we have to keep that channel open, but we have to start opening other channels to create again trust between the two countries at the community level, at the congressional level, at the institutional level. So as Turkey, we are ready to start that process indeed, and we have never stopped indeed. When they looked at the surveys, we did make it very clear indeed that at the people level, at the field side, the surveys to support US decisions were going down, and we were making it very clear to the US side indeed that you have to, we as the Turkish officials were having a hard time to basically communicate with our own people when they see US in Syria supporting YPG, PKK over there, and the same terrorist organization killing our own citizens within our border. That makes it extremely hard for us to communicate that friend can do such an can be in such an act. So we made it very clear to the US side at all levels that yes, you do have a right and you should fight against terrorism. We do fight against terrorism as well. But you cannot fight terrorism. You cannot fight terrorists by using other terrorists against them. Because PKK is a terrorist organization recognized by US as well, recognized by EU and NATO as well. And now getting back and using that organization to fight against Daesh doesn't make one in a good position, put in a good position. So as Turkey, we did try our best to communicate this issue to US officials from top to bottom. We will continue providing that open channels. But at the other side again, I said, we have learned to deal with the issues at an issue level. We don't put them into one pot. So while we were trying to convince US, including Congress indeed again, and the presidential level, for certain issues to make them understand, but at the other part, we have $100 billion trade volume to reach indeed. That's a target that has been agreed upon by both presidents. So our organizations, our ministries, and our ministers as well, and businesses, civilian organizations as well, have been working very hard towards reaching that goal. And I strongly believe that that will strengthen our relations between US and Turkey, and that will definitely create an opportunity for us post-COVID side. And again, tourism is another area that we would like to increase the number of tourists that coming and going to both countries, not just from the economic point of view, from the social point of view. We see that that's an opportunity for two societies to understand each other, to know each other better. So hopefully we will have, that will create another opportunity. Post-COVID period will create another opportunity to increase that tourism, the relationship, using that opportunities at the tourism level as well. So the answer is yes, definitely there are certain opportunities, and we are looking forward to making use of those opportunities as both countries and officials of the both countries.
Mr. Vice President, thank you. We have, I know, a few minutes left, or 5-10 minutes. So another question from the audience, Ellen Makowski from Center for American Progress. Mr. Vice President, Turkey is the second year of its presidential focused governance system. Last year, you were appointed by President Erdogan to lead a commission to review the system and propose the improvements. How is that effort progressing? What changes are you considering? And how do you feel your office, the Vice Presidency, is it working out structurally? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we did conducted a study indeed on the presidential system, and this is something that we will be continuing. That was not a study just a one-time study that we will be continuing maybe every year or every other year to see what kind of opportunities exist out there. Our study was not regarding to see whether presidential system was working or not, but our main goal for that study was to see how we can improve the system and whether there is or there are places that were not working as planned. Uh, Fortunately, indeed, the results shown that the way we conducted that study was we have made surveys, talked to different sectors of the society, business world, NGOs, all the governmental body, legitimate, all the legal bodies, Congress, and some of the political parties as well, and gathered data, uh, made analysis of those, and made sure that our own uh, we have tried our best to make sure that we will not let the results, we won't have any impact on the results other than the data. No more than 97% of the problems were not systemic related, but the operational related problems or issues indeed. So we have classified them to see which ones were real system-based problems and which ones were the implementation-based problems or issues. More than 97%, 97 or 98, if I do remember correctly, more than that percentage was implementation-related issues. And we directly started basically solving those problems one by one. So we have been addressing every single problem, every single issue that we have determined during that study. So far, this pandemic period has shown it very clearly as well. The presidential system has helped us a lot in terms of concentrating and in terms of bringing all different parts of the governmental body and different parts of the society and concentrating them on a single target indeed, goal. So we do see real advantages. We have been living real advantages of that presidential system right now indeed. And this system creates, differentiates indeed, the governing body from the legal body and the Congress from each other. Before, during the previous system, we used to have an election. So the political parties, people elect their representatives. Whoever got the majority at the parliament forms the government. Then the government used to uh, prepares the laws and then send it, but not the laws in it. Makes the preparations and then send it to the parliament. So it was almost certain that whatever the government sent was going to be turned into laws because the government has the majority at the parliament level. So the parliament was supposed to control the government implications but it was not able to because the government is part of that represents the majority at the parliament. Right now, with the new system, we cannot send or propose any legal documents preparations for the parliament. I forgot the technical term. That's why I'm just trying to use different ways to make myself clear. We can talk about, we can tell the parliament about our needs, but we cannot ask them to pass any law that would basically indicate that will solve our problem. We can just talk about our problems, and totally depends on the parliament either to pass it or not to pass it. Like the US government, for example, right now everybody thinks that, okay, there is there exists President Erdogan over here, and the political party at the parliament. Right now, we don't have the majority at the parliament indeed. So we have to go with we have to get the support of other political parties at the parliament. So there is indeed a balance between the three: governmental body at the parliamentarian side and the legal part of the government. So yes, as a summary, the study we did conduct last year regarding the presidential system, we have figured out what the issues were, and again, more than 97, 98% of them were implementation operational issues. We have been solving them and addressing them one by one right now, and we'll be continuing doing that in the coming years as well.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We are running out of time, just already, after 8 p.m. right now, Turkey time. So one last question, and if possible, we would like to get a very quick reply, but it's an important question, so I couldn't leave out. That came also from our audience and from ourselves. Do you believe there should be also regulations adopted like the ones in non-proliferation and peaceful use of nuclear technology, also in virus and this kind of research projects, as we also can see that this can also easily lead to a bioterrorism as well if in the hands of bad people? Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
This is a very interesting question indeed. Of course, the answer is a very well-known answer. I don't need to even answer to this question in terms of yes or no. The answer is, of course, yes. Of course, yes, we do need a kind of a regulation adopted like the ones for nuclear weapon non-proliferation and the peaceful use of nuclear technology. The answer is yes. But the parties indeed, what happened when we have adopted a regulation for the nuclear weapon non-proliferation? So does that mean that none of the countries in the entire world doesn't have nuclear power? US does have the nuclear power, right, as far as I know. Russia has nuclear power. China has nuclear power. Israel has nuclear power. India has nuclear power. There are many other countries, I guess, I don't know. And there are others like us who have signed that agreement, doesn't have. And from our experience, we know that those countries, when they believe that they are in need, they have used those weapons in the history. We all know that. So there's no guarantee that those countries will not use, again, those nuclear weapons when they need it. So such an agreement doesn't mean much. If you would like to have an agreement, that should require that no single country within the entire world can have nuclear power. Or any country could have nuclear power. None or all. That's why, again, at the beginning, if you remember, I said all, whatever it is, should serve all the humanity. If we ask, whatever we ask for, whatever we are asking for ourselves, when we start asking it for the others, then we will start creating a better world for all of the humanity, for all of us. So when we sign a kind of like a bioterrorism regulation, whatever we want to call it, similar to nuclear weapon non-proliferation agreement, so that will mean that, okay, how did this pandemic happen? There are many questions, right? Right now, people are questioning, or some countries, including US, questioning China, whether it has come from the Wuhan labs or not. And China is questioning whether it has come from US labs. And there are many other countries who has those labs as well. So if we come up with a new agreement saying that whoever has those labs could still continue to make those research, develop those bioterrorist activities, whatever you want to call it. And for those who doesn't have, should stop. So what we are going to do is create another copy of what we have done for the nuclear powers case, which has not created a better world indeed. So that somehow starts a competition to have more or better nuclear weapons to compete with each other for that power struggle. So I strongly believe that yes, we have to, but that should bind every single country around the world. That should include nuclear power, nuclear weapons as well, and chemical weapons as well. Whatever it is that is somehow harmful to humanity.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ali?
Yes. Mr. Vice President, we would like to thank you for your time. Very productive and informative webinar that we had for your time. And I would like to thank you, our partners, Atlantic Council in Turkey, and also thanks to all our audience. This video is going to be available on YouTube and social media as well. And Daphne, would you like to say a few words before we close?
Yes, absolutely. I would like to thank also to our wonderful audience and to those wonderful questions. We wish we had more time to cover all of them, but we try to cover some of them, just during the time. And Mr. Vice President, it was an honor to host you, and we do hope that we will see you at another platform next time. And thank you again for joining.
Thank you very much. It's my honor to be with you, Daphne and Ali. Great to be with the rest of the audience that I cannot unfortunately see. But again, thank you very much. It was an honor for me to be with you anytime.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful information and discussion. Thank you. And thank you, Ali.
Thank you.